everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Leah Catherine and this is Leah Sees Movies. It is officially Sundance Festival time, and while I haven't been lucky enough to go in person yet, I am getting to attend virtually this year and I am super excited. Yesterday was the first day and it kicked off to a very good start with the documentary Flea, written and directed by Jonas Rasmussen, and literally seconds before filming I just found out it was picked up for distribution by Neon, so yay distribution. And I'm not surprised because it's really freaking good, guys. It's super good. I did not do my research as much as I probably should have, and when I started the film I didn't realize it was a documentary. I just thought it was an animated film about an Afghani refugee, and then it started and it's based on a true story, and I was like, oh, okay. And not only is it based on a true story, it's actually the life story of a close friend, childhood friend of the director, and this is after 20 years, him for the first time hearing the true details of what his friend went through going from Afghanistan to Denmark. It is very easy off top to make comparisons to Persepolis, and it's really not Persepolis. I think a little bit more obviously emotional, and there are these truly dark and depressing parts of it, but there's a lot of humor in it and a lot of lightness that is interwoven into her story. Whereas in Flea, not that it's melodramatic or sad, but it really feels almost like a therapy session. As I said, Amin, who is the director's friend, or at least the name given in the film, he says that this is the first time he's told pretty much any of his life, his friends, the people he's known for almost 2 decades. They haven't known what he'd been through to get to the country. He's uncomfortable talking about it publicly, and so it doesn't feel so much like a satirical or funny look back at his life. It feels like this man really unleashing, getting over these hurdles and breaking these dams that have held him back emotionally for decades. And it's not a therapy session, obviously, but the fact that the director is his close friend really makes you feel this trust, because he's opening up about something that I don't think he would have been comfortable with if it had just been another person who happened to be a director. It's hard to get that same level of trust, even for someone who has your best interest in mind, than with someone who you've, loved and cared for 20 years. That's a hard thing to replicate, even in the best of interviewers. It's very cathartic. That's what this movie is. It's telling the story, and it gets sad and it really gets heart-wrenching, but over the course of the film, even though it's not your story, you can feel Amin's journey, not just through his past, but through his emotional present and dealing with the blockages in his life from all the things he hasn't told people before. Once I realized this was going to be a documentary, I went, well, why is it animated? Especially once the story gets going, and the more attached you get to Amin and the more attached you get to his family, the more you're like, I want to see his face, I want to see what he looks like. There's, to create this human connection. But there is a reason. I mean, I'm sure it's not the only reason. There's a lot of artistic value in animation, but there is a reason his identity is obscured that I'm not going to spoil now, because I do think it's a pretty impactful revelation as to why he can't have his name and identity out there. But even if the reason was ultimately just to protect the subject, the use of animation gave them a lot of range and a lot of room to explore the emotionality of the story, because there would be these long sequences with just heavy shading and darkness and color, and not even so much in the facial expressions of the characters, because obviously they're animated. It was actually a pretty simplistic style. It wasn't extremely hyper realistic or extremely detailed. So instead it was the color work and the line work of the animation that would, along with the score, that would give you these emotional journeys with these characters. Like, you'd have these scenes of characters, drowning, where their faces aren't even animated or aren't even drawn, but they're underwater. Everything around them is turning gray. You can see the hair changing color and literally no facial expression, and you're still getting the impact that it's having on them and convey this emotionality to you. While Flea covers Amin and his journey as from a 4 or 5-year-old growing up in Afghanistan to eventually a 10-year-old fleeing Afghanistan to a 15-year-old traveling to Denmark on his own, while you do go through all of his past, obviously, a lot of the documentary takes place in the present. It's interspersed with how do these things that he went through growing up affect him in the present, affect his relationship with his partner. You even get these, it's really great because, you know, it's things behind the camera looks that they animated, because you see him going from laying down in front of a camera telling his story of his childhood to then you cut. It's still, you know, cameras, the metaphorical camera is still rolling as we get to see him then talk to his friend and say, you know, I've never told anyone that, or, you know, I actually need a little bit more time to deal with that. I need a little bit more time before I'm comfortable talking about that. And so, like I said, all of this creates this sense of intimacy. You're not just seeing the on-camera version of him, you're getting to see him in his real life, you're getting to see the struggle of telling his story, and you're getting to just see him pet a cat, drink some wine, go house shopping at one point, and all of these things of seeing him now, seeing his really fully realized life, and not just, and then I went to school and then I got my degree and here's what but you get to live in his life, because the director's perspective as his friend, he feels like so much more than a subject. He feels like my friend. By the end of it, like I said, I was like, I wish this wasn't animated, because I know why it's animated, but I want to see his face. I want to put a face to this name. I want to put a face to this journey that I have been on with him, because now he is my friend too. While the majority of the story is told via animation, you do get interspersed clips of real life newsreels of the events that Amin is describing, and it is always shocking. You're always brought, so it's weird, you're brought out of the story but then placed very firmly into the real world. I think it's easy to forget that this is a documentary as it's told. Like, it could just as easily be a magnificently told animated movie, and because, you know, that the lack of facial identification removes that realistic aspect to it. So not only are you just being shown newsreels of here's the war in Afghanistan, he'll describe, you know, the experience of human trafficking and traveling from Russia to Denmark on a boat, and then you'll get a news clip of a boat and you're like, wait, is that the same boat? Because for a while I was thinking, oh, it's just like a boat that matches his description. Then I'm like, wait, no, this is like real newsreels of the things he's describing, and it almost turns into a where are they now, because, you know, of course we hear about refugees and here's a horrible story about, you know, all these people on a life raft, or all these people who are smuggled in a truck or on a bit, but then it's like, okay, well, maybe that's newsreel, but these were kind of faceless refugees that, you know, you don't get to hear the story. You're just like, oh, that's horrible, and then most people move on. And so it was really interesting to think this was almost a where are they now, because there probably was someone in the 90s who saw his sisters and didn't know it. And so now it's like, yeah, those weren't just people on a boat, those were my family. And the big stories that people eventually moved on from was someone's life. And it really helped. It was really well done. I think the editing was great. When they chose to bring in that real world, it always helped to hammer down and emphasize the story he was telling and ground you when you needed to be grounded. It's almost weird to say that a documentary had a happy ending. Generally, we don't give that label to a real person's life, because most of us know that even the happiest times tend to end, and then there's some boring times and, you know, horrible times and back to normal, and it never ends as simply as there's a happy ending. But I will say that this movie kind of had a happy ending. Obviously, we don't know what's going to happen to Amin from here. We don't know what his life is going to be. But in those final 5 minutes, I was primed to hear something horrible. I was like, oh no, we've been on this journey with him, and this is it. This is going to be where we just get kicked in the face, because I think we come to expect that. We expect a tragic retelling of someone's awful life, and we don't actually. We get this really happy ending where I was just like, oh god, after all of this, is this how it's gonna end? No, it's happy, and I'm not gonna say what it is, because I think everyone should get that experience. I was so relieved. I'm like, I don't know this man, but I'm so happy that this went so well for him, because he deserves it, and he'd been through a lot, and I was really upset about the idea of having to watch another sad, tragic story before bed because time zones. I was watching this at like midnight. It left me very satisfied. Like I said, I don't know this man, but the movie really cultivates the sense of intimacy and the sense of trust. And he'd given me that. He'd given me the trust to look into, see his story, and I'm very happy with the way it ended. I looked at my notes and I said my heart was toasty warm, which is true. If I did have any complaints about the film, there's really two main things. This movie is a crisp 90 minutes, and as I mentioned earlier, there's kind of long scenes of drawn emotional states where the art style is used to convey emotions. There's a lot of, you know, silence or still image, and I think without some of those scenes we might be cutting down to like 78 minutes, 80 minutes. I wouldn't say they're too long or super slowed down the pace. It never, you know, made me bored. I wasn't looking at my phone or anything, but it wasn't long enough that sometimes you go, okay, I think I get it. Or I think we can move on to the next scene. But, you know, it's just something to note. It wasn't an awful thing. It was just something I noticed in the film. And then the other thing is there are two characters from his past that don't really get revisited the way I would like. And then at the end of the film, they get a line, you know, after the film ends of like, and then so-and-so and so-and-so were found a couple years later, you know, and you're like, wait, that was a big deal. Like these are important figures in his life. They deserved a little bit more screen time. Maybe we could have cut some of those, you know, art scenes and animated their return to the story. So that was my main thing, is that I ended the movie going, but what about these two people? And the movie ended, and then we get that one line, and you're like, okay, that's not enough information. You know, it's not my life, it's his life, and I'm sure maybe there are more details he didn't want to share, but it did feel a little abrupt. Like, it was a pretty major thing that got dropped, and I was just like, this doesn't seem to match this kind of tied up with a bow feel of the rest of the film. It felt like the one hanging thread that, you know, was bothering me. But I mean, on the grand scale, like, that's not much to complain about, because it's not like it's a regular movie where it's someone's written story and you'd go, you know, you left that little plot hole there. There's not a plot hole, it's a person. It's a real story, and there's real reasons why maybe he doesn't want to go into detail about what happened with these people. So you can't, you know, it's hard to analyze the motivation behind why they may or may not have been included to the degree that I would prefer. But that was the one thing that, as a viewing experience, stuck out to me. I was going, hey, where are they? Why did we drop that storyline? But I mean, other than that, it's a really harrowing survival tale that is very nicely ensconced in this friendship and this relationship and this sense of intimacy and trust. This doesn't feel like the kind of tragic refugee story I expected going in, to be honest. It felt very cathartic. It felt like a story of emotional growth that just happened to parallel a story of escape and survival. Flee is a very great movie. I'm very happy they got picked up by Neon, and I'm hoping that means some of you guys can see it really soon. Alright, thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to see more, please like and subscribe. If you'd like to see some of my old reviews, you can check out my website, leahseesmovies.com, or follow me on Twitter, also at leahseesmovies. If you wouldn't like to do any of that, but you've watched all the way to the end of the video, thank you. I still appreciate you. Have a great day, and peace!